first thing, can you please state your first name, your age, and what city you currently reside in Arizona?
Yeah, so my first name is Amanda, last name Arispe. Arispe is how it's pronounced. I always say Amanda Rice Crispy, and people remember it that way. My city I currently reside in is Phoenix, Arizona, and I am 29, gold.
Can you tell us how many children you have, their ages, and if you're currently pregnant?
I currently have an 8-year-old son. I also have a stepson who's 10 years old.
So first question, like actual question.
Yeah.
What is rewarding about being a mother, and what challenges do you face as a mother?
I think rewarding as a mother is seeing things that are so, like, everyday to me be so important to him. And I think being a mother, that helps you slow it down, because you're like for example, going on an escalator, like in the mall. Like, to me, I'm just like, whoa, let's go. But then I realize, wow, you've never been, this is a whole thing. Like, we need to coach you through this, how this moves, how your foot moves. And things like that throughout life, just little simple things like surprise parties. What are those? How do those go? How do people interact with that? I think that is most rewarding to me, because I forget that I was once that little and those things excited me. And now I'm older and I'm just like breezing through life like there's no time, you know? And for me, just seeing his face and capturing those moments is rewarding to me.
How was your pregnancy experience or experiences? For example, were they planned? What was your overall outlook about being pregnant? Did you have any complications, any support?
So when I got pregnant, I was actually out of state, away from all of my family. My husband was out in the oil field in Oklahoma, where I had no friends, no family. He worked mornings, nights, would come home after a couple days. I was pregnant. I felt super alone. I would talk to my grandparents on the phone, of course, but I felt very distant from everyone. The doctors there, it was the community was pretty much the same in this little town I lived in Oklahoma. So going into doctor's appointments was literally like I'm this foreign person, and I felt really nervous to ask questions about is everything okay? Is this normal? Is this normal? I felt very intimidated. I got pregnant when I was 20. Well, I had my son when I was 20. I got pregnant at the end of 19. So for me, it was just a crazy, out of my comfort zone, 1,000%. And then not until I was about 8 months pregnant did I move back to Arizona. And I had already created this shell around myself of I know what I'm doing, I'm a great mom, because I had to develop that being alone. So then when I had my son, I had him in labor by myself because I threw all of my family out because I was so insecure to have people see me in that moment and pushing and all the other things that go down in there that we're not going to talk about. But it was, for me, I wish I had built more of those connections and those ties and had people to share my birth with and my whole process with. I wish I felt more confident in myself being a young mother to record it. That's something I wish I did, and I tell all of my friends that have children, I'm like, record it. You might think it's crazy, record it. You're gonna wish you did that. And I don't plan to have any more children, but if I do, 1,000% there will be a video camera in there, because it's such a beautiful moment that I didn't fully grasp that. I was very shy and timid and embarrassed, and like I said, I didn't even have my family in the room until he was already coming out, and the doctor actually brought them in, and I was like, okay, good thing you did that, because no one would have seen him. But yeah, for me, I was very timid, and I think it was because I was kind of in my birth by myself.
So you mentioned also, like you said, at 8 months, you all came back.
I came back, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so you said you kind of just changed. It was
yeah,
so
I was so
can you
used
talk
to
a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so I was so used to being by myself and handling what I needed to handle about getting huge and going to my doctor's appointments by myself. So I really, being 19, I really felt like, I need to just be an adult, and I need to just make sure that everyone around me thinks I know what I'm doing, because I feel like sometimes in healthcare, they see a young mother and they're like, oh, you're fine, that's just normal. And it's like, is it though? Or are you just brushing me off because you think I don't know anything? And so I witnessed that the most when I lived out in Oklahoma, of being brushed off with my pain, especially in giving birth. You know, I feel like it was a moment that I was like, are my questions and my concerns valid? I started to question myself. So, but that also made me build a shell, I was saying, over myself, so that then I wasn't able to build that like connection and support group, but I was able to strongly feel confident in myself as a mother and giving birth. And then when my son arrived, I was like, we know what we're doing, we got this, we can do this by ourselves, you know? And so when family would come over, even, I would kind of just be like, and I'm like, oh, you want to hold my baby? Like, that's so weird to me, because I'm like, okay, like, what do I do? Like, give me my baby back, you know, because I didn't know what else to do. So I think it's a matter of rethinking that you do have support. That was my biggest challenge. Like, let people hold your baby. People want to actually help you. They're not just trying to, you know, be like, you're a bad mom, let me hold your baby, you know? And I think living alone during my pregnancy made me think that, okay, maybe everyone's thinking I'm a bad mom or I'm a bad pregnant. Maybe I should be working out. Other people would work out when they're pregnant, and I'm like, dang, should I be working out? Like, and I'm eating Pizza Hut at like 12 o'clock at night, and I'm like, oh, you know? So it makes you question yourself, I think, when you're by yourself being pregnant. So that's why when I see groups like yourself or foundations like yourself, I'm like, these are the things that people need. Because when you don't have that support system, you really just start to doubt yourself. And that ends up trickling into your child if you don't watch it. So that's a really big piece of what I do now, is make sure my kid feels empowered and seeks community.
Where did you or do you get advice about or information on pregnancy, childbirth, and or parenting? Because, you know, every mom that has spoke to us is in different levels or stages.
Yeah.
And so since your son is 8, so where did you or do you get advice or information about pregnancy, childbirth, or parenting in general, like parenting advice?
Yeah.
And do you think that this type of information was or is useful or relevant to you at all?
I'd say at the start of my pregnancy, I thought I had to buy all these books, and I rarely read them, honestly. I was mostly on Facebook groups and reading what other moms actually went through and their curse words and everything, and just seeing like, okay, that's what is happening to me. None of my friends had children at the time, so I couldn't reach out to my friends. They were like out living their life, you know? So I reached out to my grandmother the most, I think. My grandmother is somebody that got married at the age of 13, has been with my grandfather since. She has 3 children and never has complained, never, you know, that's just that era. They're just constantly working, constantly doing, and they like thrive in building that foundation of a home and family. And so me, I'm very colorful compared to her, and so I'm over here pregnant, like, this is what's happening right now. And she's just probably so uncomfortable with me telling her all these things. And mostly my grandmother, I would just call her because I was out of state. But then when I came, she was right there at the hospital, like trying to help me do things. And my grandmother was the main source of any questions I had. And then, like I said, Facebook groups, any online communities that I could seek, people that were going through what I'm going through at my age. And so, yeah, that was pretty much my outlook. And I do think it was helpful, but I think having more of a community is what's important, because that's one person's opinion. And like I said, there's a huge a generational gap. So something that she would think, my friends would be like, you do not need to do that, you know? And I learned that now because I've learned to build that community with my like fellow moms now. So now when my grandma's like, oh, don't do that because this will happen, because they lived through the era of like Y2K, so they're like she has 2 fridges stocked, and I'm over here like ordering groceries on the weekly basis, you know? So I think now it's better to have a full community rather than just my grandma, you know? But no bad things to my grandma. She's super helpful. Yeah.
That's interesting. You bring up generational like differences
Gaps.
because it is.
Yeah.
There really is. So what type of things do you do to make sure you're healthy? So healthy for yourself and for your child or your children or your family. And then what sort of things make it difficult for you to achieve that health or that ideal health?
I think for myself, something that since 2020, I know everyone says it's so crazy and it's just a crappy year, but for myself, I think that has helped me with paying more attention to my mental state. I think that's also given me time to incorporate my son into things like yoga, which is crazy to think that my little crazy son sits down and does yoga, but he loves it. He really does love it. And he also has been watching that Avatar cartoon. It's like an anime. So he thinks he's like the airbender when we're doing yoga. It's so cute. But things like that have made an impact on my family to just, take some time to yourself. If you're stressing about something, recognize that stress. Because when I was raised, stress was like, that's not a thing. You don't have anxiety. What is that? People don't have time for anxiety. But now, in my life as an adult and having my own family, I'm able to recognize stress is a part of our health and making sure that that's reduced. Anxiety is a part of making sure that our mental state is good. And that's something that I work with my family on. Like yesterday we did a whole gardening thing, which I thought would be 2 hours. It was all day. It was super fun though. And things like that, like hands-on, things to calm us down, being back in nature, paying attention to how we feel. If we're stressed out, get away from your phone, get away from your PlayStation, get away from your TV. Let's go outside. Let's do something. We made like orange garlands of like dehydrated oranges. Those are awesome. You got to plan ahead though, because you make the oranges in the dehydrator. I thought you could do them like in an hour. No, it took like 24 hours. So we didn't get to do them till the next day. But for me, staying healthy is our mental state. We do also incorporate like greens, lots of greens, but we do also eat out. But for us, being healthy in our house is our mental state and recognizing when we're stressed, because in this era, it's so fast-paced. We need to make sure that our minds are ready to conquer the next day. If we get into the next day already just like, oh, this is going to be a bad day, I'm not going to get this done, then when we get into that next day, we're not going to do our best. So that's something that me and my husband both like project onto our son.
A follow-up to that. So
yeah.
Is there anything that makes it difficult for you to achieve like
Yes.
as you would like to, or makes it a little bit more take longer, or is there any like obstacle in the way?
Yeah, I think right now with myself working at home, I'm a project manager for Aetna, which is a healthcare provider, and project management, it's like on. It's not like I clock in at 5 and get off at 8. No, it's like anytime something's due, like we gotta get an update to the timeline. And that sometimes makes it difficult for me to incorporate that with my family, our time to just hold our space for each other. And sometimes I think that makes it seem like, oh, work is more important than anything else. And I think that is the most difficult thing with this whole pandemic is managing work and life, because now our work is in our lives. It's right upstairs. I'm on my laptop and my son's like, we're supposed to do this. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's in the time frame of his break for his online school. And so I'm like, in 20 minutes. And then I get caught up. And then it's like, no, that didn't happen till like 6 o'clock at night instead. So I think that is the most challenging right now, balancing that work-life balance and keeping our mental state like in a positive manner right now.
So it kind of sounds like work and life, it just like blends together.
It has blended
and there's like
so
no
much.
Separation between the two. Like you said, our work is in our home and like vice versa. So
exactly, it's weird. It's really difficult.
Yeah. Okay, next question. What type of support, resources, or events would you like to see in your area?
I think more events catered towards moms that do, say have multiple children, have work-life balance, like I'm saying, communities that are more open spaces of not just, I feel like a lot of the events are vendors. You go to an event and it's like vendor. And it's like, okay, where's like the circle where we're just chatting like we are now? Where somebody's saying a problem and they're like, yes, I have felt that. And yes, I understand like those vendors help sponsor those events. I get it. But what are those vendors bringing to that goal or to that mission other than vending? I think that having some type of like connection in the middle where you leave and you're like, wow, like I really felt great about that event, not just that was a fun event. Like now I want to leave an event and feel like, yeah, that's a great support group. That's a support group that I'm going to bring so-and-so to next time because they've been struggling, because I feel like I have a lot of friends that come to me with their struggles, and I feel like I enjoy being that person, but at the same time, like some days I'm that person, and some days I would like to give you more of other people to talk to than just me because I don't know everything, and I want to leave a place and be like, yes, I felt that connection and I built that connection and I feel great about that to now refer my other friends to go there.
And to be clear, this area is Phoenix, right?
Phoenix, yeah.
Is it like dead on Phoenix, the city?
Yeah. The Phoenix, city of Phoenix.
Okay. Because some people are like, oh, Phoenix, but no South Phoenix or like Lavina or something.
I say just as Phoenix. Like Phoenix, yeah. Like I'll drive where I need to go if it's a community that I'm like, yes, I love those women, we connect, let's do it, Yeah.
Okay. What are some things that are taboo about pregnancy, birth, or parenting? So what are people, so people being doctors, media, social media, other communities, or other parents, so what is it that people are not discussing that you feel needs to be discussed?
I think how we touched on previously, like the dismissiveness. I have a younger sister that just had her baby. Her baby's now 1. She goes to doctor's appointments of like her concerns and she comes back and tells me about it and how she's so frustrated, and I'm like, why did you not say that in there? Like now you're venting to me and you didn't feel comfortable and feel confident to tell that doctor because that doctor just shuts you up. I remember taking my son in to a doctor and explaining to him like, hey, like give me some more information on like his ear, because my son had an ear problem and he had to end up getting tubes in his ears. And he's like, oh, it's just ear infections, My son had ear infections for a year, about a year. And then I finally was like, I got on a new health insurance. I was able to just go to a specialist, ear, nose, and throat myself. I didn't have to get a referral, anything. Boom, went there. They were like, oh, he needs tubes in his ears. And I'm like, a whole year of just, constant, and I breastfed. So I was like, this is not going to happen to my son because I breastfed, which is a misconception, I guess. I think that if you breastfeed, your baby doesn't get sick. No, he does. And so I took him to ear, nose, and throat specialist. That guy was great. He scooped out all the wax and was like, yes, we need to get tubes in his ears because what happens is it gets a blockage and it could actually blow out his little eardrum. And I could just imagine. But my whole point is that I allowed that doctor to keep brushing me off for about a year until I finally was like, no, I'm going to go to ear, nose, and throat specialist. I'm going to try to figure this out myself, get a second opinion, because it's a misconception and misunderstanding that people think, my doctor said this, so that's it. And it's like, no, you should go and get a second opinion. And I think a lot of mothers and new mothers are nervous about going to another doctor, getting a second opinion, taking that extra step because they think, oh, this is a doctor. They know. They're not going to tell me wrong. But doctors sometimes have so many patients that it does happen that they shuffle you through and they don't take that extra step. So I think that's something that needs to be spoken more of. And I feel like women of color more, because they're the ones that feel a little uncomfortable and their generation has told them, the doctor said this, we need to do this. And I'm like, I'm going to question that doctor, you know, because like I said, I came from a generation that's what the doctor said, that's what we're going to do. And me breaking those generational rules is hard, but I also want to put that through to like my little sisters and my friends that are younger and make sure they understand, like, don't just take that answer. Like, this doctor was probably in a hurry that day, didn't want to run that test, then your kid maybe has influenza or just, you know, something crazy, and they don't take that step and they just go home with cough medicine, you know? So I think that's something that needs to be communicated more.
How old is your sister, your younger sister?
She is 22 now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So in the United States, Black and Native American women have some of the worst maternal and infant health outcomes. So for example, the number of women who die in childbirth or due to pregnancy-related complications, infant deaths, etc. So why do you think that is, and how does this make you feel?
I think, like I said, I've never have heard that statistic, and that is, you know, it makes me feel like, what information are we not providing to these women? What questions do they have that they don't ask, and then now result in these types of, you know, outcomes? It makes me feel really sad that a lot of those women probably could have had a different outcome, perhaps, if they had more of a support group or if somebody was monitoring more. I'm sure some of those are, you know, just could not have changed, but I'm saying, like, the ones that maybe possibly had questions about, is this normal? Is this supposed to be happening? And just out of fear or out of, you know, insecurity of looking like a bad mother or just confused or scared, did not reach out to somebody. And that's what I would think is probably the main concern. Or maybe there's just a disconnect on communication from the doctor and the mother that's, you know, undergoing birth or had her newborn and didn't take that baby in, or the doctor was like, you know, that's fine. I think it's the communication barrier. I think that needs to be improved and strengthened from doctors to the women and mothers that are undergoing that.
So what factors do you think contribute to a healthy pregnancy, an ideal birth, and a successful transition into parenting?
I think for main factors of when you're being pregnant is your mindset. I think your mindset, you need to be preparing yourself for what is about to happen. You're going to be a mother. What are the things you're going to do when that baby comes out? I think taking time to really get comfortable with yourself and really build that bond with yourself. And because once that child comes in the world, you need to be that rock that this baby's now holding on to. I think then when you get into them being a toddler, main factors are whatever you think is important is not. Because I feel like that could be a struggle when a toddler is over here like, I'm gonna go get an orange from the table, and you're like, oh, I'm gonna try to get the dishes done. No, you need to go and get the orange with the toddler, or now all the oranges are on the floor, you know? So I think that's a huge factor of once you get into, you know, being 1 to 3 years old, it's like what you think is important is now second and maybe third. But like that time is when they're moving, grabbing things, moving around. And I think that is a huge thing that I communicate to my friends and my family that have children is like, whatever you think is important, put it down because it's not. And then you said the other age groups were?
So just like pregnancy,
in
birth,
general,
and then like just parenting in general.
Parenting in general. I think parenting in general advice would be maybe don't be so critical on yourself versus what other mothers are doing. I think that we need to understand that our children are not all going to be raised the same and have the same reactions. And I think sometimes being a mom with other mothers around with children the same age, you kind of have yourself like comparing like, oh, they're really excited about coloring. Why isn't my kid excited about coloring? Maybe something's wrong with him. He doesn't like to color. He's an unhappy kid. Or they're walking and you're like, why isn't my kid walking? You start to question. But then we also need to remember, as adults, we don't all like to color. We don't all like to listen to the same music. So why do we think that all children need to be the same way? Why do we think that? And it's because our insecurities sometimes overcover and overcome what we're raising, which is a child who's going to be their own individual person in this world. So we need to focus more on what are they wanting to do and support them on that. And if other people are doing something else, we need to be like, that's okay. That's what they're doing. That's what they're doing. You wanna play in the dirt? Play in the dirt. You don't have to color. And I think that is something that is really important to realize. We're raising an individual, not a group of toddlers and the blanket statistics.
Last bonus question. Okay, so as a mother, what type of questions do you ask yourself from time to time?
I ask myself, am I being distant to my child? Am I disconnected to what he really likes, what he doesn't like? Because I think back to my childhood and I felt, a lot of disconnected feelings. And I think, how did I communicate that back then? Which I don't remember, and I probably didn't communicate it very well when I thought I did. And so for me, since I can't remember back then, I try to ask him questions and oh, so how's this going? Or try to pry, but then I also don't want to be too prying. So I think a question that I ask myself the most as a mother is, am I making a connection with my child? Am I keeping that connection? Do they feel connected to me? It doesn't mean that we're in the same room doing the same project, but does he know that I'm that lifeline if he has a question? That's all that I need, is knowing that he knows he could ask me.